Hey, it's Brad. So, kind of random. Shocker. Um, Thought I had earlier. Any sort of a construct, like projective holodeck, pin sieve in Harry Potter, or the barf VR, like AR projector from Iron Man. Any sort of kind of relived memory, any sort of experience projected out. Well, there's, the projected version of whatever characters are in the scene, I guess. And those, at, potentially best, would be kind of a snapshot of who that person was at that moment. And like ideally in the, absolute, hate bugs, in the absolute experience of the memory, it would be essentially the memory happening again. And, like mass dream, multi-user consciousness, whatever. Imagine everyone was reliving the experience at the same time. But, as it stands, generally it's one user kind of thing. And our memories, it's more like each time you're remembering that event, that scene, you're pretty much making a new copy of it, because that's the data in your current context. It's like you can watch a movie a million times and the movie itself will change minimally, and each time your viewing experience will be at least a little bit different, maybe significantly different. Who you are and your perspective, your context you bring to the movie is different. What you get out of it is at least a little bit different each time. Each slice of it is, another refining pass on your understanding, your concept of what that movie is. And the same thing with your memories. The more you revisit one, the more you've optimized it down to what it means to you and what the concepts are that are involved. And that doesn't mean like necessarily reducing its, mental footprint. Sometimes a memory can end up meaning more and have a larger impact. But, in general, just the fact that it's saving the change of trajectory, like whatever your brain, whatever path is gonna, whatever cycle is just gonna continue going on if you let it roll. It's those things that are, mildly jarring that are most notable, because that's not the expected value. That's not even in the range of expected values for whatever this cycle is looking for. I'm not sure if that makes any sense at all, but that's how I roll. So imagine then, just theoretically, some sort of a semantic persistence to memory, like a light surface or projected space, however you want to put. And imagine if you were in one of those projections, on a barf holodeck, whatever, with full data, and you're the person in control of the hologram, and there's an entity there. Speaking of Star Trek, there's episode of, there's one where Geordi made a copy of this female engineer that he wanted to work with, but had incomplete data, so he ended up having to fill in details, and so that, of course, made him more fond of her. And that turned it into real awkward, especially when she showed up and saw the real doll version. But then another one of my favorites, when Data playing Sherlock has his enemy of Moriarty come to life from weird science reasons, and he's a construct. He's a non-soul entity, however you want to put it, but has consciousness and intelligence. And so trying to think of something from the perspective of an entity like that has consciousness but no soul, that's just it's a brain brownie of a thought experiment. But then imagine that, but instead of holodeck being a memory, and in the memory perceiving your future self as you remember it in the future. Kind of like instead of just a one-way deja vu thing, kind of whether metaphysical or, neurological mundane. Like the whole thing of, retrocausality coming out of emergence, more of, patterns manifesting because they were already embedded. Like, you have a math problem of there's these two blocks, and, this one weighs 1 kilogram and this one weighs 2 kilograms. If people are going to pick both of them up, which one gets picked up first? Well, it depends on what they are and, how far apart the people are and what the people are there for. Like, if one of those blocks is, a brick of bills and a bunch of money, then that's probably going to be the one that people go for first. So there's additional information that's relevant. The semantic value of the objects is relevant to their interaction. And that seems, silly on a physical scale, unless you start, thinking about quantum or even chemistry. But trying to envision what it would be like to see, because there's plenty of times, if you ever had really vivid deja vu to the point where that you had that memory and may have even documented it, and then now you're having that memory that you saw then. However that works. Whether for a mundane explanation, we can say your brain put together some pieces that, eventually the observation, as it started to fit into place, your brain filled in the gaps. Sure, whatever. Or, maybe it's just a scenario that happened and you're perceiving it from one end and perceiving it from the other end, potentially from the same perspective, but also potentially not from the same perspective. And those you would probably perceive as these visions that people have of God or of persistent entities like, shamanistic, ayahuasca, whatever, various, persistent spiritual realm higher beings. Well, if you view it as this is someone that knows me, this is someone that understands exactly what I'm trying to say and think, well, it's because you're a memory of that. That thing remembers being you, because it is you. You're in the memory. And you don't know who it is, because you don't know who you're going to be yet.